Hello, everybody, and welcome to another great episode of My EdTech Live. Thank you so much for joining us on this wonderful day, and wherever it is that you're joining us from around the world, thank you as always for all of your support. As you know, we appreciate all the likes, the shares, the follows. Thank you so much for engaging with our content. Thank you so much just for all of your support. And talking about support, we definitely want to give a big shout out to our sponsors. Thank you so much to Book Creator, Peel Back Education. Thank you so much to Eduate. And thank you so much to Comeback Coffee, because Comeback Coffee definitely keeps us caffeinated and highly creative. So thank you so much for your support and believing in our mission to bring you some exciting and wonderful conversations like every week. And I am really excited about today's conversation. Now, my guest is somebody that I kind of lurk around and follow for a very, very long time. But it just so happened that we ended up, we had the opportunity to present at a same event, and I got to sit in on his presentation, and it just kind of blew me away that immediately during that time, or he just maybe finished, I said, "Hey, do you want to be on my show?" And I was just so excited to get him on. And so I would love to welcome to the show today, Dustin Rimmey. Dustin, how are you doing today?
I'm enjoying the end of the school year and getting to parent before the craziness of all things summer go down.
Excellent. Well, Dustin, I'm so excited that we've been able to connect. I mean, longtime followers of one another and
Yeah.
just admiring people's work, your work, and admiring just our network. The work that they do has been fantastic. And it was great to see you at that event. And really,
hmm
what I saw was something fantastic to that just really blew my mind. The fact that you're able to do this in your classroom and really enhance the learning and really get the students involved and just really excited about technology use because as you know, right now in the news we do see a lot of screen time backlash and things of that
Yeah.
sort. But before we get into the meat of the conversation, Dustin, because I got all excited, I was like, for our audience members
Yeah.
that might not be familiar with your work just yet, can you give us a little brief introduction and what your context is in the
Yeah.
education space?
So my name is Dustin Rimmey. Everybody just calls me Rimmey. I've been teaching since 2007 in Kansas. My background is mostly speech and debate and social studies, and I got hired directly into my dream job. And 2 years ago, I decided it was more important for me to be a parent and be present for my kids. So I changed things up, and I've spent the last 2 years as a middle school social studies and avid teacher. Last year, I was an academic interventionist at the high school level. And then next year, they are moving me back into a social studies classroom to fill a need there. So I've been a journeyman across the last couple of years. But I think the one thing that has been consistent across where I've been at or what I've done is I've always been fairly tech forward in trying to find ways to engage that in uh both my personal learning and development, but then also trying to get some technology skills into kids, as ironically tech classes kind of slowly go away as we've got more technology in their hands. Outside of the traditional classroom space in Kansas, I run a website called the Teacher's Playground where I just kind of scream into the void about whatever I'm into in education. It could be an app that has kind of tickled my fancy. Uh, it has been, ooh, I saw somebody cool at a conference talk about these things. And then, really, the last 2 months, I've kind of fallen into the pattern of Mondays, I'm talking about here's a quick strategy or something you can pick up and do. Wednesdays, I've been kicking it old school. I've been going back to like visible thinking routines and like kind of stripping the tech away from it to kind of ask pedagogical questions. And then Fridays, I like to get on my soapbox and rant about anything from why do we get rid of recess once you hit beyond the fifth grade to I hate grades to let's argue about screens versus technology versus Google versus AI. So I just kind of like to pontificate from time to time and sometimes poke the hornet's nest of playing devil's advocate in some of these online discussions so we, don't get stuck in echo chambers all the time.
Yeah, and that's something that is fantastic, Dustin, because I mean, I see your posts and there definitely is a lot of variety in those posts, but one of the things that I love is like you said, is that you don't get stuck in those echo chambers and often has been the case, especially since, November 2022 and generative AI and you just simply hear the same thing, same people, same groups, same everything, and so it's great to hear like you mentioned, kind of like poking the hornet's nest, but it's questions, ideas, thoughts that maybe people tend to forget about because they're so like just in their space so much that
Yeah.
they just keep hearing the exact same thing. So I love that you do that. Also, I do want to say that I commend you too because I know that speaking of kind of like you mentioned, like a journeyman in education, but you've also been a journeyman at conferences like for various platforms that you advocate for, that you use personally, and that you have found success in. And I think
Yeah.
that that is a testament to your work, your voice, and really amplifying, like you mentioned, the great points that the platforms have and how
hmm
you've used them in a mighty way. And that's something that is fantastic. So let's go ahead and just kind of talk a little bit
Yeah.
about this because I know we started off with generative AI, and I want to talk a little bit about your presentation that you shared during that Waygrounds coaching event that you
Yeah.
had. And I mean, in 20 minutes, you blew my mind. But I want to ask you, what started you on the vibe coding, and what was your idea like in initially to implement it what in the classrooms and what you
Yeah.
found helpful and useful.
So I've always been that kid that has wanted to get into computer programming and design and things like that. Like being that child of the 90s when we had like the hackers movies really start to take hold when the internet was still in its baby infant form. Like I always wanted to do that stuff. And as I would try to teach myself the different programming languages, it just wouldn't stick, right? That I have one of those same things like, as I listened to your presentation at that ed camp on working with language learners, I have one of those brains that other languages just cannot stick in my brain. That even when I go, oh, it's a logic puzzle or the structure, once I know it, it becomes the same. It Nothing has ever stuck. Even, the Duolingo owl and I get into fights about my C minus Spanish abilities. And that's what has kind of kept me away from wanting to try some of the creation things with coming to programming and stuff like that. That I'd go through block coding courses and be like, ooh, I did this neat thing, but then got stuck because I couldn't take it to the next level. So what really got me into the idea of vibe coding was during the winter of this past school year, during Matt Miller's winter ditch that like online asynchronous thing. It was Tony Vincent, and I can never remember the other guy's name, and I feel terrible for it. But they did a session on vibe coding where they just kind of walked through how they used, various AI agents to create things. And I went, oh crap, I have ideas. I can boss my robot overlords around and go, I want to try this thing. And given that I really don't mind wasting a bunch of time to create things that fail, it gives me kind of that grit to sit down and just kind of do that constant iterative prompting to get, something generated that I want. And I started with a lot of the simple things that we go all over the internet to use, to get my own lovely digital timer with some kind of hanky music in the background, or a chat bot where, instead of using some of the other apps that I've fallen in love with, can I peel behind the hood and go, here's my own Google Gemini space so I can understand the technology behind it, because that's part of the curiosity that I always have when something goes awry with kids is, was it a me problem with the way something got prompted, to can I understand what our evil robot overlords are doing in the conversation with the kids? And then it just spiraled where I was like, ooh, I like doing the Wordle. Can I create a Wordle that's just history words or, logic puzzles or things like that? And it was, this past year was fun being an interventionist because I got to teach literally every subject with, to get kids back on track to graduate. But then I also shared a room where an English class was taught, and the two women who taught this class were very, very content brilliant, wanted to lean more into technology, but did not have like a lot of, they're not in like the bigger EdTech world that some of us dive into head first. And I would always be like, ooh, can we try this? Or, ooh, can we do this thing? So they would let me try and code things to then share with their class of students. So we reviewed for their Macbeth final essay by playing the Myrtle puzzle game that was coded to each act of the play. So I like with the idea of vibe coding, especially now that, you know, Copilot, Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude all have these specific coding modes now where I could just caveman prompt it into creating something that I want and then playing with it until I'm willing to share it with an audience of either students to try something or colleagues to try something. And then with my kids who are like me that are either programming interested or my kids who are like, you're literally killing computer sciences by doing this. Uh, they help me understand some of the processes and things that it does. So it opens up some of those bigger conversations where I can learn from it and the kids can see how they can use it as a tool, even if they don't have like the language learning deficiencies that I run into.
And
So
you know, I think
it's been a fun journey that it, my chat histories are like 4 million things of failed ideas that I can't delete because I do it on like my Gemini school account.
yeah. No, but you know what? You hit on so many great things here, Dustin, that I kind of want to unpack a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
especially, for a lot of educators that are out there that are still, it's been, going on, what is it, going to be 4 years now,
Mm-hmm.
and it just seems like the time has flown by, but there are still, that are teachers that are AI hesitant. They still are maybe a little scared, or maybe they're just simply saying, hey, you know what? By the time they hear this episode, it's going to be summertime, and they say, you know what? I'm ready to kind of dip my toes a little bit. But one of the things that I love that you said that I know you said it at the conference too was you said caveman prompting. And I think that, for a lot of us, like you mentioned, especially feeling overwhelmed because it's like, oh my gosh, I
Mm-hmm.
need to learn, C++, or I need to learn this language and this language and so on and so forth. With this, what I love is, like you mentioned, you have that idea. You're essentially communicating that idea, whether it's through voice and just prompting one of the LLMs to say, hey, this is what I see, or this is what's in my mind. And then they're taking that information and trying to create and replicate what it is that you had in mind to come to fruition, which I think with that alone too is a great exercise in critical thinking. It's a great
Mm-hmm.
exercise in academic vocabulary and engaging with proper academic vocabulary
Yeah.
that even though you may not know it, but as you learn and you see some of those outputs, you continue to learn that language as well. And I think that that's something that is fantastic that I can see your students and even yourself and us as the end users too being able to grow with this and still, like you mentioned, use it as a tool to get us to a certain point, but not to just do away with, hey, now I understand what, a Boolean means, or now I understand what,
Yeah.
all that great stuff. So it leads you into that. And I love that you mentioned that.
Yeah, and I like how, so I've been doing a lot of thinking and writing about creating AI resilient assignments, right? Because we're afraid in a world where AI can now literally do just about anything and sneak it past us. I want to think about how can I create something that even if a kid just does their assignment in ChatGPT, how can they document to me their iterative processes, their journaling along the way. So it's had me think a lot, even while I've gotten done vibe coding something, I'll go, oh crap, and go back and look at either an assignment that I've given kids, something that I've started kind of prepping for with my history classes that I found out that I'm teaching next year, and go, how can I create it either as an explicit option for kids to use, or even if I go, hey, this is should be an AI free assignment, even if they do it, how can I ensure that they are still learning something either content wise or skill wise from going through a similar prompting process? And then I also like when you said Boolean. I love how a lot of that stuff is coming back, because I remember in the early days of the internet, right, we had to get those very specific search logics burnt into us of like where to put quotation marks and with and without and within and all of those things. And it's fun seeing a resurgence of those things coming back in a both search, like academic researching context again, but then also in the way that we want to play with and instruct AI.
Yeah, no, and that's excellent. And that's really a great point. But also, like you mentioned, what I love is just how you, as an educator, find a need that there is, and you say, "Hey, you know what? Let me see what I can come up with,"
Mhm.
and immediately be able to find or create, I should say, a resource, an intervention for a student that, like you said, they may not be understanding it in this way. However, if I can create something in this way that, leveraging their likes or leveraging the way that they themselves learn, and say, hey, here's how we can still have that intervention. And you demonstrated and shared a couple of things that you've created. But what comes to mind too, Dustin, is that now with some of the abilities that even just the free platforms have to be able to vibe code. I mean, I remember, teachers having to pay stuff out of pocket just to
Yeah.
get like, something like to put up on their classroom screen with a timer and things of that sort.
Yeah.
Now you can create it specifically for you, for your needs, and you have it readily available. You have, practices like I've seen teachers create math practices, seen teachers
Hmm.
create vocabulary practices that are, still pertain to what is being taught in the curriculum, but
Hmm.
making it in an engaging way that, even though it is screen time, but it is solid
Right.
learning screen time, not just
And
like, hey, just keep them busy.
I think as we've kind of followed each other, because as I DM'd you, I was like, we kind of started off on opposite areas of kind of the conversation where you have been a little bit more hesitant about quick adoption of things. And I
Mhm.
am very much I'm going to dive in and play with it before I unleash it on the world. But I think I've kind of landed back where you just said that the days of giving kids something to do with technology is now as unproductive as when my kids at home earn their screen time, right? That they get their Kindle
Mhm.
to play their games or watch something for an hour and a half in the day, and just going here, they don't get anything out of it. So looking at, instead of arguing about whether or not technology or screen time is good or bad, making sure that everything is done with an intention, I think is important. And I think AI has become more accessible than it was, 2 years ago from us being able to control the input standpoint, that I can make sure that I'm embracing a lot more intentionality, right? We both have a variety of different platforms and tools that we love and we will die on a hill defending. But sometimes I might not be able to pay for a teacher premium subscription out of pocket. Sometimes my district might cancel a subscription. So it's, how can I understand how to create similar experiences and offer the same kind of safe and productive environment,
Mhm.
and safe and productive tool if I lose access to these things that I love or have discovered, across the internet. And I think that's been the fun thing with vibe coding, especially is, I know that I'm not going to be able to do all of the amazing things that you can create with a Brisk or a Magic School or a School AI, right? Because I don't have a team of devs and programmers and curriculum experts. I have me, my reptilian brain, and word vomit into whatever agent I'm in. But I think the more that I've just felt comfortable doing what they say you shouldn't do with AI and treating it like Google and asking dumb questions and asking simple questions and, doing those iterative things, it's made me feel more comfortable being able to defend why I've had students engage with specific AI models or specific technology to colleagues, to administrators, or to parents. And I think that becomes the most important thing, is defending the why we did it. Other than it's new, shiny, and a skill that we want kids to have, it needs to be beyond that. And I think the more we can understand it and play with it, the better we feel, and the better the experience our kids will have in terms of learning anything and engaging with any kind of content.
Yes, absolutely. And you mentioned something like, and of course in following each other, like you said, you are, and you were always one of those like, hey, like move fast, dive in, break things, fix, reiterate, and go. And I'm more of like that kind of cautious advocate. And I still am, but my goal, like I always say, is like I really want to just bring like those extremes. Like, if you're over here and over here, let's just meet in the middle. Let's find some great stuff. And as time has progressed, and hearing educators like yourself and seeing the work that you're doing, and especially what I got to see firsthand, and the way that you help students be able to learn in that way, or create something that you feel like, you said, like, man, I mean, my school does not have this specific platform. However, I can go ahead and create something that can
Yeah.
help the students. I think that there's so much value in that. And also the fact that you said too, that even while you are still showing kids, or the young adults, these activities, they're still learning so much about the process. And it's not just fun and games. They're learning, they're building those critical thinking skills, just like you had to
Yeah.
when you iterate, you're changing language, you're changing skills, you're changing whatever the case is. And I think that, like you mentioned, that makes you so much, it brings value to what you're doing. And then also the ability that you have to adapt immediately and overcome just by tweaking a couple of things and
Yeah.
getting to what you need to create for a specific student or a specific subset of students in a fast, easy way to intervene and enhance their learning. I think that is something that oftentimes we don't hear enough of. So I'm glad that we're having this conversation, that you're able to amplify what it is that you're doing, because there's still a lot of districts that are out there that are very scared and don't know what to do. And maybe they play it safe. And I'm not saying like, they play it safe in the sense of, okay, I'm going to get this platform or get this platform and get this platform because they're going to do exactly what I need for them to do. However, a little bit of vibe coding here from a teacher such as yourself, and then all of a sudden you're helping out other teachers, then it's like, okay, we can go in a little bit deeper and really bring that learning to life. And it really kind of reminds me of many years ago when Chromebooks just started coming out. I was the Chromebook heavy teacher. I
Yep.
signed it out for the whole year, and then it's have my students create. It's like, okay, I was that learning engineer, because one of the things that you mentioned was you're engineering those learning experiences. And I think that's something that is so important in engaging them. So using the technology for that to capture the learning, the growth, the process, and like you mentioned, those AI resilient assignments, sort of in that sense, to where they're still showing you the process, justifying their work, and being able to share with you that, yes, there was some assistance. However, I can demonstrate how, why, and when it was that I used this to
Yeah.
get to this outcome that shows that they've mastered the learning. And I think that I'm loving it. In other words, it's
Yeah.
getting me really excited, and we need more voices like yourself to help more people get excited about this and the possibilities that can occur in classrooms.
Yeah, and that's what the ironic thing of all of this, and what really started me wanting to do more either conference sessions or creating content about vibe coding is at TCEA in February. I had a session that was like gamifying your social studies classroom. So we talked about like the hardcore gamification experience. We talked about game-based learning. And then at the very end, like the last 20 minutes before I transitioned into Q&A, I had an example of here's something that I had vibe coded. And in a room full of 100 people, maybe 5 people were familiar with the term or the process. And someone was like, hey, man, I know that, you were all busy with all kinds of things, but would you mind creating some resources or just showing some of the things that you've done? And of course, with that post conference energy, I was like, oh, heck yes, I will. And I created, a little ebooklet. I created some YouTube videos. And then World of Warcraft released its new expansion. I was like, Daddy's got to grind, and the Warlock's got to get the best gear. But now that's my plan for the rest of the summer, is to kind of finish up some of the stuff that I've started, and then kind of talk about the 2.0 level of that. Now that you've gotten your feet wet and had ideas, instead of I'm going to create a timer in 5 minutes, like, how do I go through this long form process of creating and destroying things? How do I get to the programmer adjacent stuff? Because I think this is where, the best ideas will come with, especially in the circles that we're both in online. We have those people who we know, they'll create their idea and it will be their cash cow, and good for them. And my good old Midwestern ethos is I've built this thing, I will share it with you, you please destroy it, so in the name of my good pride I can rebuild it and have that sense of good work at the end of the day to share. And that's been the other fun thing, is that I've shared things in, online, where someone was like, I got to this point and it was broken, or after 20 minutes it finally started giving some incorrect content, which I might miss because I'm not gonna, you know super bang my head into it until I'm ready to unleash it with students. So I like that we, both know areas of the online ed tech, or, teaching community, where we've got people who we will mutually beta test stuff for each other, because we all know that if I have a good idea, you're going to go, ooh, I'm going to create a version of this, and we can bounce ideas off of each other, and it becomes more useful than maybe some of the forced collaboration that we've got with the people that we physically work with. So
Yeah.
that's been the other just fun part of creating it, is knowing that I am still a novice with a lot of it, that I've got people who can help me step my game up, and people who have gone, ooh, could you create this? And I'll start with a framework of something like, oh, there was I was working with a woman in the UK where they have some very restrictive policies for their children under the age of 15. And she was wanting to do like an online discussion web with like some seventh or year seven, grade seven, grade eight, whatever the UK moniker is. And I was like, okay, let me create this, D minus version of a website tool that I like to use that she can't access because they're forced to physically log into it, and their privacy standards wouldn't let them do it. And it was like, okay, here's where you can control everything. Here's where it saves all of the data to a text file just for you. And she's like, ooh, great. She then 2 weeks later emailed me back with the file that I sent her and went, hey, I fed it into, my AI agent of choice, and here's where I made it look not like crap, where I made it have some of the more bells and whistles that I didn't put into it, because I was like, let me see if I create this option. And we've gone back and forth a couple of times creating our own fun discussion web version of a tool that I'll probably never use because I don't have the same kind of account restrictions in Kansas that she does in the UK. But it was fun just with the back and forth. And then it lets me go, okay, with this tool that I actually use or my district actually pays for, how can I leverage my knowledge of it to use that tool better? Or how can I ask the right questions to their community team, their product development team to go, hey, have you thought about including this to get it on the list? Because I know it will be done infinitely better and look way better than anything I can ever create.
Yeah. No, but that's something that is fantastic that I want to dive in a little bit deeper because
Mm-hmm.
right now in my mind, as you were describing that and your collaboration and still continuing to grow and iterate and finding how you can improve things. Again, I mean, right now what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing too, like I guess because I saw your presentation, but really what I'm hearing and in my mind, what comes to mind is, isn't that what learning is all about? I mean, you're going to get to a certain point, you're going to hit a brick wall, but then it's like, okay, how am I going to get through that brick wall? How am I going to
Yeah.
improvise? How am I going to adapt? How am I going to overcome this? And then it's whether you do it on your own through iteration, through
Mm-hmm.
your chatbot of preference or your LLM of preference, or that collaboration with somebody else and joining forces and seeing how can we solve the problem. And I think right now in my mind, what was coming through this is like everybody's so scared that, okay, I'm just going to go ahead and get the answer and I'm going to submit that. Well, yes, because there are going to be some assignments in that way. However, if we start thinking and start thinking a little bit in deeper as far as how we might leverage, like you have been leveraging vibe coding to get students to a certain point where they're like, okay, now I'm here, but I'm stuck. Okay, so now what are we going to do? What's the next step in the
Yeah.
process? What do you think should happen? You are, they are learning these skills that are truly needed, which are those problem solving skills.
Mm-hmm.
And more than anything too, is just the ability to adapt and not be scared of failure because that failure is going to be there, not to give up and then just continue and iterate and not stop. But what I love too is just like the collaboration. Look at you. You are collaborating with somebody with the UK. How often do we miss the mark on collaboration in classrooms?
Yeah.
My experience the last 8 years, as a digital learning coordinator and assessment coordinator was walking into classrooms where there is no classroom interaction like student to student. It is teacher centered and the teachers are the subject matter experts per se and they are giving the content to the students and the students are getting so bloated with that content that
Mm-hmm.
I mean they're looking for an output or an outlet but we're not giving it to them. But something like this, whether it's a vibe coding activity or something that you created so they
Yeah.
can demonstrate their learning in a nice, simple way, I mean, that goes a long way. And I think that's what really gets me excited about the work that you're doing and the success that you're seeing in working with content teachers that may not feel a little I guess comfortable with tech, but you're there to kind of help them, gently nudge them,
Yeah.
offer your help, and then all of a sudden they just take off with it. And that's something that is fantastic. It's just another resource that is there to enhance the learning experience. And that's what the message that I kind of hear and feel from you. And it's something that needs to be discussed and be talked about. So I'm glad that you are that person that is out there just sharing away and sharing your wins, but you're also sharing, some of those like, this kind of broke here, but hey,
Yeah.
guess what? I ended up fixing it. That's what it's all about, So I
That's
love that.
definitely going to be something that I see showing up a lot more on my website in the fall. Because I've got, almost 20 years of lesson plans and things that I've created from the history classes I've taught in the past. I am jumping into this, teaching these classes next year like it's year one. I'm going, I don't have any of these resources. I've got all of the cool bells and whistles that I understand now, and I'm designing everything from jump. So I am kind of jumping in with the excitement of that first year teacher of the, ooh, is this going to be a good thing that goes off? But I've also got the confidence of 20 years in the classroom of, well, 10 minutes in, it's a bad lesson. We've ate shit. Everything is broken. I know how to at least limp through the rest of the hour productively and then go, well, this is not a critical judgment of myself. I took a swing, we missed. How do we bounce back for the next one? So I think that's going to be the fun part of sharing my, everything I knew. We all say if we knew the first day of our teaching career, everything that we know now, how would it look differently? I'm ready to laboratory test that and share, the wins with the kids, but then also here's where my failure went spectacularly and publicly. And was I stupid enough to fail twice in 2 consecutive class periods without audibling? Probably. And I just think that, something that really made me more comfortable in embracing the failure was something that, one of my mentors told me in the coaching space that, I was very competitive as a debater in high school and college. I coached very competitive teams at the state and national level, but I was always told, don't live vicariously through them. Don't judge your self-worth from their successes and their failures, or you'll burn yourself out. You'll stress yourself out. And I was like, well, crap, that's true for what I do in a classroom anyway. So if I'm more willing to, take a hot L in front of 30 kids who are going to make fun of me, does that then make them more comfortable to do the same kind of thing, to take the same kind of failure? And my experience so far has been, if I'm willing to, either purposely, with that bit of that like wrestling kayfabe failure of like, I'm going to plan a failure because I want them to take more risks, or the real-time meltdown, will they try more and be more willing to take risks? And that's been fun, from, regular classrooms to inclusion classrooms to, especially with teaching some advanced placement classes, that you talk about kids that are way too high strung that need to learn how to fail. It's the kids who are, if I get a 97 on an assignment, my life has come to an end. If I can get them to fail and feel comfortable with it, like that's what we should be modeling, right? Yes, we are content experts. Yes, we know all of the things, right? I've got 2 pieces of paper that say I should be pretty good at teaching and talking about history things. I will tell my students on day 1, I am the world's worst history teacher because I cannot remember dates in chronological order. I cannot remember these big things. But here are the concepts that I can remember and play with. And I think the more they hear instead of me bolstering how hard my classes and how rigorous things will be, like, I'm a slightly functional dumpster fire most of the time. Like, those are the messages that our kids need, because they're kids. Like, we're not going to wreck them. We're not going to destroy their future by getting some productive struggle out on our end or their end. And that's what makes it way more fun.
Yes, yes, yes to all of that. I mean, as you were talking, I think that is something too that now, due to certain things, certain moves in districts, and the way that teachers are evaluated, I think that we've lost what you are describing that you do, which is the ability to just take that risk and just demonstrate and show the content in a different way, presented in a different manner that gets the students engaged, or even allowing them to also engage in creating their learning and going through those phases of, okay, I've got some success, or man, I really blew that, can I go back? But because you yourself are giving that example of like, hey, I messed up, it's okay, no worries, let's just pivot, let's go ahead and go over this and come back again. They're learning a valuable lesson there too also as well. So I mean, I love what it is that you're doing, and especially that risk taking aspect, and the fact that you're going to start like year 1 going in and like a brand new teacher now with the tools and the knowledge that you have, And,
I'm
and,
having
and
fun.
yeah, you're going to be having some fun. You're going to learn a lot more. And now you're going to be able to apply that learning and see how it's going to work and see how you're going to tweak it and see where it goes. But at the end, the result is, and I guess the goal, I'm saying the goal is still to help our students learn, get to that, learn what they need to learn, be
Hmm.
successful, but doing it in a maybe slightly different way than that formulaic way of,
Yeah.
just going through one chapter at a time and making it more engaging. And I think that's something that is fantastic. And I'm really excited for you. And I definitely would love to follow up with you. And maybe what we'll do is we'll do like, okay, Dustin's first semester back, and we'll do a follow up show like your first semester, and then we'll do the second semester, and then just share your findings. Like, what have you found? What worked? What didn't? And how you might. How you overcame and how you adapted, because I think that that's a wonderful case study to be able to
Yeah.
share with the world and say, hey, you know what? Like, we've got the tools that can help us as teachers really expand our knowledge and be able to create something specifically at that very moment or adjust it for that very moment. Why not leverage what we have with, like you said, maybe the little know how that we have, but you're starting and that's going to take you a long way. And this is fantastic. But Dustin, it's been fantastic, man. I loved that I had the opportunity to catch up with you and
Yeah.
really get to know you a little bit more and get to see in your mind a little bit more, which really excites me because you really have a heart and for a heart for teaching, and the way that you speak to is you really truly care not only about the art of teaching and the way that you present it, but also in helping our students succeed. So
Yeah.
thank you for what you're doing, and just please continue doing what you're doing. And I definitely want to have that maybe first semester, second semester show just to
I
follow up. I
laughed.
think that'd be great.
I laughed when you said that because I immediately think of the memes of Barack Obama looking at how horribly he aged across the 8 years he was in the White House and how well he's aged now in the, what, 8 years
Yeah.
after. And it's like you're going to see one of two versions of me in December. You're either going to see Barack Obama at year 8, where like I'm all gray and in a puddle, like I have seen some shit. Or like I'm going to be bright eyed and bushy tailed with no care in the world. There's not going to be a gray area. It's going to be one of those two Obamas.
Perfect. Well, I'm excited. We're looking forward, and I'm saying it right now. We will definitely bring you back maybe around that December time, and then we'll bring you back in that May, June time, and then we'll follow up. But Dustin, thank you again. I really appreciate it. But before we wrap up, I always end the show with these last 3 questions. So hopefully you are ready to go. So here we go for our little mini speed round. Or not really a speed round, but I just like to call it that. But anyway, so as we know, every superhero has a pain point or a weakness. So for Superman, kryptonite was what weakened him. So I want to ask you, what in the current state of education would you say is your current edu kryptonite?
I mean, it's all technology. Like I've said, my ethos has been I'll try anything, I'll run into it head first. And then I also have that stubborn side of like, I will go down every rabbit hole to test its worthiness. So the amount of time that I have wasted testing and just playing with all kinds of tools, toys, platforms, it all technology
Excellent.
or any
Great answer.
technology that offers a digital badge. Because as you can see by looking at behind me, I like to collect physical things. So if you're like, hey, do this and we'll give you a digital badge, and I go, say less.
There you go. Awesome. All right, Dustin, here we go. Question number 2. If you could trade places with one person for a single day, who would that be and why?
I want to spend time as a librarian for a day or two. That I've met some very prominent librarians in the schools that I've worked in, but then I've also talked to a lot of, and learned a lot from library and media specialists online. So like I'm a big fan of Rachel Lemansky. So like if I could go live in her young, like dealing with younger children in a library context for a day, Like, I think I would learn so much from an experience like that because it's just so violently different from the world that I live in. But I also think I could gain so much from an information literacy perspective. Like, anybody who makes the physical library still relevant in the year of our Lord 2026, where you can do everything technology, like, all of these people should be, given their miracles for sainthood, because they make them thriving, inviting spaces in an era where, like, physical media is dead.
Excellent. All right. And big shout out to Rachel. She is fantastic. I follow
Yeah.
her as well, and she's doing some great things. So big shout out to Rachel. All right. Dustin, last question. If you could have a billboard with anything on it, probably maybe I guess in the biggest freeway that Kansas has in your area, what would your billboard say and why?
Play, period. Like, we have gotten rid of the spirit of play in school, that high stakes testing, we can name all of the things that has kind of pushed play and curiosity out, is a big thing. But I also think that's true with us as adults, that, we are all work rigorous jobs. We have our own children that we have to feel like we're not failing. We all have things that take away from our ability to let our hair down and have some fun. I think play, period, is the most important thing that we can do, because that's the most joy we have when we're little kids. We're being creative, we're being inventive. We don't care if we fail when we're playing anything. So the more play we have, the better.
Excellent. Great billboard. I absolutely love it. And I absolutely loved our chat today, Dustin. Thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with me. And again, it was great that we got to connect, on the session that Wayground put. And now we're here talking, and I love the insights that you shared, your passion, your heart. And, like I said, continue doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I
You
promise,
too.
I also, real quick, how can our audience members connect with you if they're curious to either see or hear more about vibe coding or anything that you might be doing?
So I should be the person that has, like, the same social media for everything, but I violently do not. So I tweet a lot, both education stuff, and then I got real mad about baseball announcers over the weekend. So on Twitter, I'm just Rimmey. On Instagram and TikTok, I'm Teachers Playground, and play is AI. And the same thing is true with my website. And then you can find me on LinkedIn, which I forgot I created a LinkedIn profile in, like, 2009, and was like, oh, actual things are happening on LinkedIn now. Where I think I'm the only Dustin Rimmey on all of LinkedIn. And you can connect with me and play the daily puzzle games, so I can be excited at being in the top 90% of Dustins on a daily basis.
Excellent. Well, we'll make sure we link all of that in the show notes too, Dustin. So thank you again. And to our audience members, as always, thank you so much for your support. Please make sure that you stop by our website at myedtech.life, where you can check out this amazing episode and the other 368 wonderful episodes, where I promise you, you will find some knowledge nuggets that you can sprinkle on to what you are already doing great. And again, a big shout out to our sponsors for allowing us and helping us make this show and continue with the show and believing in our mission also. So again, big shout out to Comeback Coffee, Book Creator, EduAid, and Peelback Education. Thank you so much. And if you're interested in becoming a sponsor of our show, please reach out via email. You can find us on our website too as well. So again, if you'd like to sponsor the show, please feel free to reach out. We would love to have you join us in continuing our mission. And again, my friends, one more thing until next time, don't forget, stay techie.